live on 2GB, 2CC and stations across Australia. It's the Chris Smith Show.
G'day. Welcome to Saturday morning on the radio. I was all set. I thought I'd over-prepared today, and Anita has been preparing at a great rate of knots this morning, and then I realised as we were about to start, I don't have a set of headphones. It's like a skin diver jumping into the water without goggles. You can't do that. Welcome to the program. Good to have your company on this Saturday. The 4th of September 2021. A stack to get through today. I firstly want to get through some breaking news in terms of drugs. This will be explained to us at 10:15 this morning at an Australian Federal Police press conference. But the AFP, Border Force and New South Wales Police Force are going to talk about the arrest of a man linked to Australia's largest heroin seizure in almost 20 years. The 29-year-old Mount Colar man was arrested at his home yesterday in connection to a 347-kilogram heroin seizure from December 2020. Now, this amount of heroin, 347 kilograms, is worth, street value that is, an estimated $156 million. And it equates to more than 1.1 million street deals. $156 million, the biggest haul and seizure in almost 2 decades. And we'll hear more about that at about 10:15 this morning when police hold their press conference. Australia's former Chief Medical Officer and current Secretary of the Department of Health, Dr. Brendan Murphy, has been named Father of the Year. Now, I'm not sure that this announcement was due today. It was certainly not due yesterday when the Prime Minister jumped the gun. That's what he did at the press conference yesterday afternoon, just before National Cabinet got together. So the honour from the Australia Father's Day Council and the Shepherd Centre recognises the role dads play in their family and the wider community. Dr. Murphy, as you know, best known for his role in supporting Australia's response to the pandemic. He is also a proud father of 2 sons and a grandfather to 2 little girls. So he says he's humbled by the incredibly special award. I was surprised and honoured to be recognised in this way. So there you go, Dr. Brendan Murphy named Australia's Father of the Year. All right, what else have we got? We've got a stack coming up on the program, including Dennis Shanahan. And where do we start with Dennis? National Cabinet yesterday. It broke up at around 6 o'clock, one of the longest meetings of the 55 National Cabinet meetings thus far. And no doubt one of the big talking points would have been Anastasia Palaszczuk, Mark McGowan, are you intending on reopening your borders? Because here is the Doherty Institute, and they will explain to you that unless you do, you're going to have to keep them closed for decades. It just would have been great to be a fly on the wall yesterday in that meeting, wouldn't it? Meanwhile, we've had several federal Labor MPs tick off Anastasia Palaszczuk and warning her not to scare her Queensland community over her concern or alleged concern on Wednesday for kids under 12. Where she got that from, I've got no idea. There's not a vaccine in the world made for those under 12. And the reason is because very, very few of them are getting seriously ill. It's just amazing, almost plucked from obscurity by Anastasia Palaszczuk. Meanwhile, Anthony Albanese won't join Bill Shorten and also Jim Chalmers in disagreeing with the concerns that she announced on Wednesday and doubled down on Thursday. What is wrong with Anthony Albanese? Wouldn't it be just simpler to do what most Australians thought of what she said and go, no, you don't scare people and families about their kids who are under 12 and COVID-19. You don't do that. That's the wrong thing to do. Anyway, we'll talk about the rollout which is almost clicking up to 2 million jabs per week. Wow. And we haven't even got the large quantities of Pfizer we're expecting in the middle of September yet. The Prime Minister has announced he'll be going to the US. We'll talk to Dennis about that. And Dennis has received a letter from one of our listeners, and I want to pursue this today. It's about Dennis's parrots. Dennis Shanahan, his parrots and his politics coming up shortly on the program. Well, you would have known the news coming out of Auckland. New Zealand police have shot and killed a violent extremist who was known to them after he stabbed and wounded at least 6 people in a supermarket. He was an ISIS fan, a supporter of the ISIS extremist mantra. I want to catch up with Peter Moroney, former police officer and counter-terrorism detective, this morning and talk to him about whether this is as a result of what's occurred in Afghanistan, and should we in Australia be sharpening our resources in terms of a possible imminent attack. We'll hear what Peter Moroney makes of what happened in Auckland yesterday. Going back to WA and Queensland and the likelihood, especially in the WA case, of borders remaining closed indefinitely, can Mark McGowan and can Anastasia Palaszczuk actually do this? Now, you would have known that, excuse me, Clive Palmer went to the highest court in the land to take on WA over its border closure in 2020. He lost. But that was because what Mark McGowan did in closing his borders was ruled to be proportionate to the risk. Now that we have vaccinations and available vaccination appointments in Perth and throughout WA, I don't think a high court could rule the same way. So maybe Mark McGowan and Anastasia Palaszczuk are ripe for the picking in terms of a legal challenge to their border closures. I'll catch up with Sydney University's Professor of Constitutional Law, Anne Toomey, in the program today. A couple of quick things. We've got our eye on the Paralympics, of course, and at around 11 o'clock today, we are looking very closely at Dylan Alcock. Dylan has won, I think it's 2 or 3 gold medals before in the wheelchair tennis at the Olympic Games. So he's a favourite to win, and so we could get another gold sometime early afternoon. We've already got 18 gold, 27 silver, 27 bronze. We're 8th on the table, which is a truly credible performance. So Dylan Alcott and the wheelchair tennis is something we've got our eyes on later today. In terms of footy, the Storm knocked off a valiant Sharks, 28 points to 16. They take the minor premiership. The Panthers looked hot, 40 points to 6 over a depleted Eels side. And then the games today, we've got the Broncos versus the Knights at 3 o'clock, Cowboys versus the Sea Eagles at 5:30, and then the Rabbitohs, who've rested 8 players, up against the Dragons at 7:30. Now, the equation for those who are wondering, given the fact that this is the last home and away round, if the Gold Coast beats the Warriors tomorrow by at least 12 points, Cronulla's season is gone, and the Titans take 8th spot. If Manly beat the Cowboys tonight, which is very likely, the Sea Eagles take 4th and the Roosters drop to 5th, which is the likely outcome. In the AFL, they're into the second week of the finals. Geelong 103 defeated GWS Giants 68. And then tonight at 7:20, Lions versus the Bulldogs. That will be played at the Gabba. And I would have thought the Lions will get away with that. We'll probably see. So that's what's happening in sport. Also, today we've got Ask a Tradie with Simon Stevenson, John Rocker, all things automotive, Peter Switzer on finance, Tom Hackett will talk about the GGs. We've begun the spring racing carnival. We'll go to the press conference at 11 o'clock to get an update on COVID for you. Jim Haynes' topic today is a beauty, Sydney's springtime creatures. What springtime creatures have you already seen in that first week of spring? Jim Haynes will talk about that. And we'll also have a reach-out winner we'll get to later in the program. Track of the day, rolling quiz. So there you go. And weather. I've got to tell you, rain will develop today, and we may get as much as 15 millimetres falling, a top of 24 in Sydney. Tomorrow, much cooler, 20, rain easing, maybe as much as 10 millimetres, so a wet weekend ahead. For the week, Beyond that, Monday, top of 19, partly cloudy. Tuesday, it gets a little warmer, 21 sunny, and then 22 and sunny on Wednesday. Weather today right around the country. Perth, mostly sunny, 19. Adelaide, shower or two, 15. Melbourne, a few showers, 15. Hobart, shower or two developing, 14. Canberra, rain, 15. And Brisbane, partly cloudy and 23 degrees. So that's the plan. That's what we're doing today. We'll obviously keep across all the breaking news as we normally do. Let's shift into gear. My number, 131873. Looking forward to having a chat with you. You're with Chris Smith, broadcasting live from 2GB in Sydney. Well, that National Cabinet meeting wound up at around 6 o'clock last night. Wouldn't you love to have been a fly on the wall as the Doherty Institute people gave Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan a lesson in reality under a future with Delta? Because they don't want to face reality. But this fractious National Cabinet is such an annoying partisan exercise in parochial politics and a real insight into the mindset of backward governments. We've got McGowan in WA, all venomous and seething about what's happening on the East Coast and the way we handle outbreaks, which of course works perfectly for Labor in WA because they know that their mob do not want an infection, not a single infection, and they don't care whether they have to remain locked up for decades to ensure that remains the case. Although I get the feeling that that mindset is changing. But he wants to do what's popular in WA, Mark McGowan. Meanwhile, the same with Labor in Queensland. As Anastasia Palaszczuk left last week's National Cabinet meeting, she was confronted with the reality last weekend of having to reopen when Australia reached 80% fully vaccinated, and she tried to find some excuse to keep those borders closed. And that's when, in Parliament this week, she came up with this gem, plucked from obscurity, based on no scientific concern or scientific evidence.
You open up this state and you let the virus in here, and every child under 12 is vulnerable. Every single child, if anyone has any children under 12 to 0, is vulnerable because they are the unvaccinated, Mr. Speaker.
How painful is this woman? How painful is this woman? Then after Wednesday, every epidemiologist worth their salt has condemned what she said, not just because it's wrong in medical science, because very few kids under 12 are showing symptoms, let alone getting ill. They're not even showing symptoms. But also, too, that she scares the bejesus out of people in Queensland, and families in particular. We've only just had permission in Australia to inoculate children between 12 and 15. There's no vaccine designed for kids younger than that. And why? Because they're not getting seriously ill. And even for 12 to 15s, Anastasia Palaszczuk, the advice from the UK is not to vaccinate most of those kids. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation announced this very morning that it does not back vaccination for all 12 to 15-year-olds. It said, on the strength of evidence so far, there was a marginal benefit to vaccinating healthy children 12 to 15. That benefit, it said, was very marginal, and it would not give the green light to that. So the only kids between 12 and 15 in the UK who might be getting a jab are those with acute conditions, such as diabetes, or chronic lung, heart, kidney or neurological conditions. They'll be vaccinated, which I think gets down to about 200 to 400,000 kids. So not only are the world's infectious diseases experts not concerned about children under 12, Anastasia Palaszczuk, one of the most eminent groups in the UK isn't interested in vaccinating the older age group. This was just Palaszczuk's way of following the Queensland attitude on borders. We don't want COVID, we don't need our border open, and the government should keep it closed for years. That is the sentiment she needs to feed to keep winning elections. The same with Mark McGowan. That too, I've got to say, that attitude is changing. I'd love to see a poll on that. And that's what National Cabinet has descended into. Party politics, blue versus red. We're not here for Australia, we're here for us. And you know what? For the time being, who cares whether WA and or Queensland stay shut? Because yesterday, all of us in New South Wales got a green light to travel abroad when the state hits its 80% fully vaccinated target. So we had Ministers Dan Tehan and Josh Frydenberg both saying during the week that this would not be the case, that New South Wales would not be allowed to go it alone and operate beyond international borders while we waited for the other states to catch up. But the Prime Minister didn't like those comments, so he was keen to point out yesterday that he would open international borders for New South Wales.
He is refusing to stick to the plan. The Prime Minister is warning they'll be left behind, giving the green light for states to go it alone on international travel. Can you envision opening that to a state like New South Wales that get above 80% and not waiting for states who don't want to open?
Yes, I can.
That happen?
Well, the national plan sets out that very clearly.
Now, the way we're jabbing at the moment in New South Wales, we could fly abroad for a holiday as early as the first week in November, 8 weeks away. You beauty, especially for families who have extended family abroad. And the Prime Minister knows why this green light is important, because for those desperate to travel, it encourages them to get their jabs. It speeds up the reasons to be fully vaccinated. And you know what the sad part about all of that is, that while we might be travelling to Europe very soon, especially from New South Wales because of our jab rate, we won't be able to enter Queensland or WA for Christmas holidays. How appallingly backward is that? Led by two Labor premiers that don't understand the desperate need to put Australia and the economy back together again as a nation. After 55 meetings of this National Cabinet, it wouldn't make any difference at all if they never met again. Dennis Shanahan coming up very soon, 23 minutes after 9.
The Chris Smith Show on 2GB. Celebrate your super dad with Bing Lee. A huge range of gift ideas with 30-minute click and collect. binglee.com.au.
COVID update from Victoria, 190 cases, down from yesterday, but they'll bob around at that rate. They're going through exactly what New South Wales went through about 5 weeks ago. 190, that's from almost 50,000 tests, so they're getting their test scores up. And they dished out 35,000 vaccines yesterday, 35,000 vaccines, but 190 COVID cases. All right. Leonie and also I think it's Michelle and Deb want to raise one thing about the Premier of Queensland with me. Leonie, for instance, says the Premier can't even pronounce vulnerable. Says a lot about an education system there, doesn't it? Happy Father's Day, Chris. Thank you, Leonie. What did she say?
You open up this state and you let the virus in here, and every child under 12 is vulnerable. Every single child. If anyone has any children... Vulnerable. As opposed to... There's an L in there. There is an L in there. I wonder whether she could spell it, do you think? 131873. Siv in Rouse Hill. Hi, Siv.
Chris, how are you going?
Very well, thank you.
I don't think Premier Palaszczuk could spell the word, let alone tell you what it actually means. I don't think so. And I have to agree with what you said about that. But a question I want to raise is, do you think some of the Queensland public who have been polled, and I don't know why we're using politics as opposed to science with a lot of our premiers, but there you go. If there is polling out there, do you think that the public who have been polled, or whoever has been polled, are actually indicating to the Premier and the Labor Party, this is the way we want to go? And ditto, I think, for the West Australian Premier.
Well, Siv, let me answer that two ways. Let me answer that two ways. Firstly, there was a national poll done during the week, which you may have seen, and only 8% of Australians wanted borders to be closed after we reached 80% vaccinated. 8%. But that is an Australian poll. I went to the Courier Mail this morning and the West Australian to try and find out whether they'd done a local poll to see whether the locals in WA, the locals in Queensland, were on the same side as their Premier, because I suspect, Siv, that they're slowly turning around and changing, and they want people to have access to their state.
Yeah, well, and I think you might be right about that, but I just think that was extraordinary. But I don't think that was helped particularly some weeks ago, and you'd remember this, some weeks ago by their Chief Health Officer, Dr. Jeanette Young, making some very, very strange comments about AstraZeneca, talking about 18-year-olds dying. I think that's contributed to a lot of the low vaccination rates over there and the vaccine hesitancy.
You know, one of the reasons why we got hold of all of that Pfizer from the UK, and this is the truth, is because they have relied all along on AstraZeneca. They've had 50 million jabs of AstraZeneca. When the AstraZeneca creator goes to Wimbledon, they give her a standing ovation. They look at AstraZeneca so much differently to what we do in Australia, and that's because of Janet Young and also Atagi giving us 3 different pieces of advice in 1 month.
And you're right about that, and I just think that, we do need to hurry up and get on with it, because economically, if we continue this sort of weird closed border mindset, that's going to affect the national economy in the long run, and we do not want that. Good to talk to you, Chris.
Spot on. Good on you, Siv. Good to have you on the program as well. Michelle says, forget Queensland, I'm going to Hawaii. Well, you will be able to, Michelle, according to what the Prime Minister said yesterday, just in terms of Palaszczuk. She has revealed, according to the Courier Mail, that she has a new boyfriend, a Brisbane surgeon, Reza Adib. I hope Reza talks to her about how to pronounce vulnerable. Mr. Adib is the chief executive of the Brisbane Obesity Clinic and is a surgeon of excellence working out of the Wesley Hospital, a not-for-profit private hospital in the Brisbane suburb. He's a leading bariatric surgeon, according to the clinic's website. There you go. Palaszczuk, just like Berejiklian, has a boyfriend. After years of research, Spinalese has just released 3 amazing new products. The new Spinalese mattress overlay, and the Spinalese back support. It's been many years in the making, this mattress. The Spinalese mattress uses world-first technology, never seen before. It's a button to change the firmness while you sleep, no matter your body size, shape or weight. It comes with the Spinalese 100-night comfort promise. Now, the mattress overlay turns your current mattress into an amazing, luxurious mattress. Here's a great idea. If you don't want to go all the way and get one of these incredible new mattresses, you can get the overlay. And the Spinalese back support supports your back perfectly if you sit down for long periods, any age, any size, and you can customise perfectly with a button. All 100% Aussie made, all with the latest revolutionary technology. I encourage you to go to the website spinalese.com.au to order and be amazed by the Spinalese technology. Dennis Shanahan after this.
The Chris Smith Show on 2GB. Celebrate your super dad with Bing Lee. A huge range of gift ideas with 30-minute click and collect. binglee.com.au.
24 to 10.
Prime Minister.
The Labor Party
Stepped over the line.
There'll be silence.
And now, politics with Dennis Shanahan.
Let's get straight to the national editor of The Australian. He's in Canberra, of course. Dennis Shanahan, welcome to the program.
G'day, Chris.
I would have loved to have been inside that National Cabinet meeting yesterday. It went all the way to 6 o'clock. No doubt there were lots of things to discuss and argue, and I would have loved to have seen the faces of Mark McGowan and Anastasia Palaszczuk as the Doherty Institute people gave them a reality check of living, getting through to the future under the Delta variant. I just would love to have seen their faces as they tried to scratch their heads to work out another reason why they couldn't open their borders, Dennis.
Indeed, Chris. Look, we didn't hear anything out of the National Cabinet. It has been pretty solid as far as not leaking goes. And there was no, of course, press conference from the Prime Minister after because it went for so long. But we did know that going in, there are real differences emerging between the premiers and real differences emerging within the Labor Party, between the Federal Labor Party and the State Labor Party. We saw that Dan Andrews this week has accepted that there can no longer be 0 cases of COVID in the community. This is a pivotal moment for Australia in the whole coming out of the lockdowns.
A complete 180-degree shift in one press conference.
And look, it's explained by, if you just look at the graph of how the Delta virus is going in Victoria at the moment, and another 190 cases this morning, it is exactly the same trajectory as what happened in New South Wales. Yep. And so the Delta virus, once it's out, it is out. So Dan Andrews has accepted this. He has said yes, when they get a national threshold of 70% and 80%, the phasing in of the easing of restrictions can begin. So we actually have now Labor and Liberal premiers from the economic powerhouse of the country saying we are going to open up. And the other end, we have Anastasia Palaszczuk saying that, she wants to get information about the vaccination of children under 12 and she wants to stay strong on border closures. Now, there's nowhere in the world that children under 12 are being vaccinated.
And as I raised this morning, Dennis, according to the Joint Committee in Vaccination and Inoculation, they made the point that they would not recommend that the UK vaccinate kids between 12 and 15, let alone under 12, because there's no marginal benefit. So they're basically saying unless they've got acute conditions like lung and respiratory problems, etc., unless that's the case, they do not want to inoculate 12 to 15-year-olds, let alone under 12.
And Chris, this is part of the reason that the Doherty Institute planned the thresholds on 70 and 80%. There's been arguments, Anastasia Palaszczuk again, Anthony Albanese, they've asked questions saying, well, the children aren't included. Well, on the rates of infection and serious infection, the Doherty Institute says they don't have to be taken into account separately. Now, this is a big moment this week, I think, for all of the premiers. And Daniel Andrews has now turned around. He's agreeing with Scott Morrison. He's not sniping at Gladys Berejiklian. We've got New South Wales and Victoria on the same page. I think there's a big shift in the movement amongst the premiers.
Meanwhile, Richard Marles, Bill Shorten, Jim Chalmers, all Labor MPs at the federal sphere have basically not agreed with what the Queensland Premier did, thought it was a fear motivational factor, thought it might have been something that was not particularly science-based, but Anthony Albanese has said nothing of the sort.
That's right. Now, Richard Marles is from Victoria, is the deputy leader of the federal Labor Party. He's well regarded. He's a nice guy. He's taken as being an honest, straight talker. He was the one who came out and said that Labor should not oppose the stage 3 tax cuts. He's come out now and said Labor should distance itself. He said, the honest answer is, I would distance myself from Anastasia Palaszczuk. He's being straight up, and this is a problem for Anthony Albanese, who keeps saying she's doing a fantastic job.
She's just tried to scare Queensland families. And as Greg Hunt says, it was a moral failure. Now, the vaccine rollout, meantime, I think what you'll find in the couple of days when we start to backtrack on the 7-day pattern, we're going to get awfully close to 2 million vaccinations a week.
Indeed. In fact, at one stage, in just 3 days last week, we had 1 million vaccinations.
Wow.
So this is it's exponentially increasing. Yesterday, Scott Morrison, of course, secured a bring forward of 4 million Pfizer shots from the UK. We have to replace them in December and just reallocate them to the UK. But in the meantime, the Prime Minister says this will break the back of the required vaccinations in Australia, and we have very high vaccination rates amongst the older population in Australia.
So I'm just looking at the projection graph that came out last night. I've got it in front of me here. Vaccine projections supplied by covidlive.com.au. It has New South Wales getting to 70% double vaxxed by the 18th of October and then 80% by the 1st of November. And if you take what Scott Morrison says as biblical yesterday, it means that people in New South Wales, come the 1st of November, can go to Hawaii before they go to Perth or Brisbane.
It's extraordinary.
Wow.
As the Prime Minister said previously, everyone doesn't have to be on the bus for the bus to leave the station. This has opened the real prospect and the real incentive for people in New South Wales and Victoria, where they're doing very well, Tasmania, very high vaccination rates, where the Prime Minister is saying, if we open a bubble with Singapore or the US or Japan or New Zealand, then the people from these states can go, whereas the people from, say, Western Australia can't.
Yeah. Yep. It puts a defining line between those that are getting vaccinated quickly and those that are not pulling their weight. Now, Scott Morrison indicating he'll be going to the US later in the year?
Yes, he had another conversation with President Biden yesterday. Primarily, they were talking about the Indo-Pacific and, of course, the retreat from Afghanistan. The Prime Minister tried to get as much help as he could from the US. Now, as he says, we've moved into the humanitarian stage where we have to try and deal with what is happening in Afghanistan and get people out across the borders. The airlift, of course, is finished. All the American forces are gone. So we've now got to go back to this stage of trying to negotiate with people to get people, refugees and citizens and so forth, out of the country, across the borders and back to Australia. But the key here is that he has said he is going to Washington and there is going to be a meeting of the quadrilateral leaders. This is the very important group of the US, Australia, Japan and India, and that he said he needs to be there. Now, I think for the Prime Minister wanting to be there, what we're actually going to see, and I've tried to float this with a few people and they're playing very cagey, is that there will be a formal signing of a quadrilateral agreement in Washington.
Right. That will be a progressive step. Now, the other big story of the week is the letter that you received from a young listener who's in Tamarama, and he wanted to inquire about the Dennis Shanahan parrots.
Indeed. This is a very big moment.
Yeah.
He's been in lockdown for a while and he listens to the program. And he wanted to know where the parrots had gone. And he has a very big interest in the parrots. And I have to tell him that the parrots have actually adapted to the parliamentary sitting times. And when I'm working remotely, of course, and I finish, question time finishes when the Prime Minister says I move that more questions be put on notice. I get up, I go out, make a cup of coffee. The parrots come and knock on the window to be fed. And so their parrot feeding time has shifted to about 3:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So they're not around in the morning. And so I've actually put out some seed this morning to try and change their timing so that next week when young Raphael, who's only 4, when he's listening, he will be able to hear the parrots. So
of course.
I'm trying to shift these political parrots.
Only in Canberra would our parrots be political. I love it. Dennis Shanahan, thank you so much. Have a great week. We'll catch up next weekend.
Thank you, Chris.
Good on you. Dennis Shanahan, National Editor of The Australian. Great letter. I love it. Look, just in terms of the line, the delineation between those who are vaccinated and not vaccinated, and I think Scott Morrison put the biggest line between states yesterday to this point. What about companies getting on board? You may have heard in the last news bulletin, the Bird in Hand winery in South Australia is the first of its kind insisting on both vaccinations for its visitors and staff. They'll all be vaccinated. If you want to go to the Bird in Hand winery, you've got to be double vaxxed. Frontline Qantas workers will need both jabs by November 15. Tasmania's Museum of Old and New Art has become the first art institution in Australia to announce a no jab, no job policy for employees. And then you've got Telstra changing how its network name displays on customers' devices to Let's Vax in a move to encourage more people to get the COVID jab. If Telstra is your network, check your phone. You'll see it. Let's take a break. I want to talk a little bit about terrorism and the events that occurred in Auckland yesterday and the chances of a similar event occurring in Australia.
You're listening to The Chris Smith Show on 2GB 873.
Let's go straight to the open line. Doon, how are you?
Oh, hi, Mr. Smith?
It is Mr. Smith, yes, but you can call me Chris. It's okay.
Oh, all right. Well, I just wanted to say, I just had the joke, you'll be able to fly to Cairns in France before you can fly to Cairns in Queensland.
Yes, Cairns in Queensland. You're right.
I know.
What a
Cairns in Queensland, yes, I know. I just altered it to make it more like the other one.
I'm with you. Thank you very much for that. How ridiculous is that? But it's true. It is true. Now, yesterday afternoon, a Sri Lankan national who arrived in New Zealand in 2011 stabbed 6 people in an Auckland supermarket before police shot and killed him. 3 of the 6 people are in a critical condition. Now, this attacker had become a person of national security interest since 2016 and had been through the court system since that time. Less than 3 hours after the stabbing, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern fronted a press conference calling it a terrorist attack and noting the specific ideology of the offender. So much for a watch list then. If you're watching someone like that, you've got to be able to watch them to the degree where you can prevent that kind of thing happening, don't you? Anyway, maybe we're not kind of in the game and we don't know. Pete Maroney is a former police officer and counter-terrorism detective. He joins me now. G'day there, Pete.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm very, very well. On that point, what good is a watch list if you're being surveilled and you still get away with an attack like that, or doesn't it work that way when you have surveillance on someone?
No, it's a very fair question, and I dare say the answers to that will certainly come out over the next weeks and months in New Zealand. But look, even in Australia, we operate a watch list, and if you think about it, there'll be various categories to that watch list. I suppose let's call it a ranking order in terms of the most extreme down to perhaps someone just to watch and monitor. But look, you're right, and certainly on what I know about yesterday is that the tactical team and the surveillance police were within striking distance. So the risk must have been at such a heightened state for them to be deployed 24/7 and within moments of him. But, as you're rightly saying, that split second of time, which we will now dissect over weeks and months, something's gone wrong.
Say, for instance, today in Sydney, how many surveillance teams would be on similar counter-terrorism targets?
I probably don't want to give the specific number. One, I wouldn't know precisely, but also don't want to tip our hand to how many surveillance teams we do normally have running.
But it happens today.
Oh, definitely. Look, absolutely, Chris. And look, the more, so if we look back in terms, and let's keep it in terms of Operation Pandanison in Australia about a decade or so ago, we were running numerous surveillance operations around the clock. There's only so many resources, believe it or not, within New South Wales and each and other state and territory in terms of surveillance teams. Now, those surveillance teams have got to compete with other crimes, other high-priority crimes like drugs and homicide. But then also you've got the intelligence component. But to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. What you saw yesterday in New Zealand would be occurring here in Australia today.
Okay, question is, would this attack have occurred with reference to what has happened in Afghanistan? And second question is, do we have to hone our focus on counter-terrorism again because of what's happening in Afghanistan?
Yeah, going to the first part, it's probably a little bit early to tell, but certainly the timing is there. But as I understand, coming out of New Zealand, they had been monitoring him for some period of time, and that's not defined. So whether or not there's a direct correlation to what's going on in Afghanistan, probably a little bit too early to tell. In terms of the second aspect of do we have that capability here in Australia, we have numerous different laws. For example, we have conspiracy laws that would enable us, providing there's sufficient evidence gathered to that point, to move in and take that person aside. And we've done it countless of times in the past.
Right. Okay. I appreciate your time. We're in a period of our history, of course, as Afghanistan is taken over again by the Taliban, and that area of the Middle East becomes, a festering location for other terrorist groups. We've just got to be on watch once again, like we were back in 9/11.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, and it's hard probably to shift that focus from our current predicament, and particularly, the COVID period over the last, say, 12, 18 months. It's hard to get people to move from that shift. Terrorism in this country, whether it be right-wing or Islamic extremism, has not gone away.
Yeah.
All that's happened is our focus has shifted. Yeah. And to go to the latter point of your second question before, because absolutely, we've got to still remain vigilant. There's nothing stopping what happened in New Zealand happening in Australia today.
Okay. I appreciate your time, Peter. Have a good weekend.
Pleasure. Take care.
All right. Counter-terrorism expert Pete Maroney. It's 4 minutes away from 10.
The Chris Smith Show on 2GB. Celebrate your super dad with Bing Lee. A huge range of gift ideas with 30-minute click and collect. binglee.com.au.
A lot of listeners sending me text messages saying, well, they couldn't put this bloke in court who attacked those people at the supermarket in Auckland. Why not throw him out of the country? Damn good question. I don't know the detail to even have an opinion on that, but you're right, it's a fair question to ask. I want to return to this issue of borders and whether WA and Queensland can keep us out. Anne Toomey, constitutional lawyer, coming up shortly.
You're listening to The Chris Smith Show on 2GB, 2CC and stations across Australia.
A very good morning to you. Great to have your company this morning. So many emails, a wad. And a busy hour ahead. We're interested in that press conference being held by the Australian Federal Police at 10:15 because there's this heroin seizure, the biggest in 2 decades, which is well worth reporting. $156 million is the estimate on the seizure. Extraordinary. 347 kilograms of heroin. We'll also have Simon Stevenson to take your calls on home improvements in Ask a Tradie. First question in the rolling quiz. Tom Hackett returns with the spring carnival racing season underway. So we'll get to Tom and try and pick you a few winners for the GGs today. Penelope writes from Bowral. Enjoy your show always. Thank you, Penelope. I'm originally from Perth and my brothers are still there. WA voted for McGowan and one reason is there was no decent opposition. The Libs in Queensland and WA are terrible, so they need to lift their game and things might change. Perth people have always been isolationists. I left when I just turned 17 and never looked back. Ian from Surrey Hills was wondering when travelling to Europe, will we have to wear masks all the way? Good question. I think some of the airlines will do that if they allow any unvaccinated people to be on the flight. Now, I know that Qantas won't be allowing any unvaccinated people to be on the flight, but will we have to wear masks? I think that will be something that each individual airline will decide on. Chris from North Rocks, the Premier in WA, Mark McGowan, reminds me of quite some years ago when Leonard Hutt wanted to secede from WA, became Prince Leonard of Hutt. Yes, maybe Mark McGowan could secede and become Prince Mark of Perth. And Mick from Lamia says, the parrots are all in Campbelltown eating our mandarins and also our apples. I'm going to catch up with Anne Toomey, constitutional lawyer, very shortly. We'll talk about whether WA could do as Mark McGowan says and keep the border closed indefinitely. Mark has a brother who lives in Perth. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, hi, mate. And as for heroin, I had a mate who lost his daughter to it. It's murder. They should throw the book at him, put him in jail forever. Mate, look, speaking to my brother on the phone, he went to the AFL last night. He's going to the Bledisloe tomorrow. His daughter's swimming in a swimming carnival over there today in WA. And he said, look, mate, it's a bit like going to the dentist to have a root canal. You know you've got to have it, but you don't really want to face it. And he said, look, you know, we're enjoying our freedom over here. We know it's coming. We know it's coming, but it's hard to go, yeah, righto, let them in. It's just how they feel. I think, look, he's just an average battler, but that's how he feels. He knows it's coming and he knows eventually it's going to get into WA. But he said the beach weather's coming.
Yeah, but see, you can't remain in a cave like that away from the rest of the nation if you call yourself part of Australia. Like he's almost operating like his own country. You go down to Margaret River, for instance, Mark, and that's all well and good that people in Perth are having a great time in the sand and the beaches, but in West Australia, Margaret River region, those wineries, those boutique accommodation places, which are owned by small and medium businesses, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, they are going bust. Tourism guides in the northern part of up near Karratha and north into those great areas, they are going bust. There's no one there. The people in WA have all seen these part of WA. They rely on not only people from other parts of Australia, but international visitors as well. We've got to get them back working again.
Yeah, true. He did mention that. I should have mentioned that. He goes, I know there's people like Kununurra, there's a big, massive tourist market up there in northwest Australia, and they are struggling. but he just keeps. But he's sitting on the fence. But he admits to sitting on the fence.
Yeah, they kind of know it, but they don't want to face reality. And I think as soon as their Premier faces reality, the people of WA will face reality as well, which is what's happening in Queensland, Victoria, as of this week. One locally transmitted case of COVID-19 in Queensland. One new locally acquired COVID-19 case in Queensland. I'll get you some more information from Queensland on that very shortly. Bill in Armidale, WA. Love Armidale in Perth. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm trying to condense what I want to say because I've been listening to this for a long time on your station. I'm starting to err on the side of opening the borders, but I've got cerebral palsy. My partner and I both had our COVID jabs. But the thing I've got to say is Gladys over there, she made a very big mistake. When we first got COVID here, the Prime Minister should have locked us all in our own states and we wouldn't have had it. It would be gone by now.
Oh, you reckon?
If they'd have done
Everyone
it
keeps telling me about the limo driver and how it emanated from him. We have got so many mystery cases in the state of New South Wales. It could have come in from 25 to 30 different sources by now. Bill?
You could be right, but the thing is they're going to have to open up the borders. They're going to have to do it for the economy of the country. And the thing is, nobody's taken responsibility for anything. Gladys over there, she's saying she originally said open the borders to WA, and now you've got so many cases in Sydney that it's ridiculous. We've got relatives over there. We can't even go see them. My partner usually goes over there once or twice a year. She can't move. But how do you solve the problem? You have to put it in the hands of one particular person.
Yeah, look, what you do, you get 80% vaccinated. That's what you do. You put the priority at every single press conference every day, as Mark McGowan should be doing, instead of having a slanging match with eastern state premiers and the Prime Minister. Talk about vaccination like as if it is the key out, because it is the key out, Bill. And when you reach 80%, the people at the Doherty Institute, the professors that work there on the numbers tell you that rate of vaccination will drive down deaths and serious illness, and we've got to believe in the medical evidence, and that's what they've presented to the country. We've got to stick to what we agreed with, Bill, and Mark McGowan agreed to that prior to what he's been saying in the last 2 weeks. Thank you for your call, though. Now, the Attorney-General, Michaela Cash, confirmed during the week, as did Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer, that there are no plans on behalf of government to bring constitutional challenges in reference to border issues from WA or Queensland. But several state premiers have been vocal about their plans to continue closed border policies, and we've been down this track with WA and Queensland already this morning. But it's interesting to hear what Michaela Cash said earlier in the week. She was basically saying that right now, because of the abundance of vaccinations available, that if there was a challenge, WA would not be able to keep their border closed. Now, you would recall that Clive Palmer challenged the WA government over this in 2020 and failed. He lost. But that was because they ruled that what McGowan was doing was closing the border, and it was a proportionate response to the risk. But you can't say that when they're 80% vaccinated, which is what the point being made was from Michaela Cash. Let's talk with Professor Anne Toomey, who's a constitutional law expert from Sydney University. And I like talking to Anne because she speaks a great deal of common sense, and you can understand through the legalese exactly what she's referring to. Anne Toomey, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. No pressure then. I've got to be very clear.
We're all hanging out, of course, to get out of lockdown, to get out of restrictions, to get to 80%. And it looks like as if New South Wales will do that before scheduled timing. But you've got some states who are suggesting to National Cabinet that there's a problem with kids under 12, as in the case of Anastasia Palaszczuk. And, of course, Mark McGowan simply doesn't want to introduce COVID into his state. Was Michaela Cash right in her understanding that there would be different evidence presented to any challenge against keeping borders closed, and that the circumstances now would make that indefensible, that the WA would lose any challenge that came before it, for instance, similar to the one that Clive Palmer took last year?
Okay, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and obviously Michaelia Cash in a 30-second grab couldn't explain all of the complications here, so let me have a little go at it.
Yeah.
So what happened in the Palmer case was that the court took a rather peculiar approach, and that is it split off two things. So one thing is the legislation in Western Australia, which is the Emergency Management Act, okay, and that's general legislation to deal with any emergency, bushfires, pandemics, whatever, okay? And that gives powers to the minister to declare an emergency for a particular area, in this case the entirety of the state, and it also gives a power for the emergency controller person to make particular orders, like about people moving in and out of emergency areas. Okay, so say you've got a bushfire, people can't come into a particular area where the bushfire is, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what the High Court did is it said it assessed that for its constitutionality, okay, and it said that it was constitutional because it has a whole lot of protections in there to make sure that any limitations are only used for the purpose of dealing with that emergency. Okay, what the court didn't do in the Palmer case was it didn't look at the constitutionality of the order made underneath that legislation, which is the thing that closes the borders, right? Mm-hmm. So it said, well, when it comes to those sort of orders, the question is not whether they're constitutionally valid. For that, you look at the legislation. It said when you look at the order, you have to see whether the order comes within the authorisation of the legislation. Okay, and that's an administrative law challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So technically what would happen next time if there's a challenge in Western Australia, instead of challenging the constitutionality of what's going on, because we already know the Western Australian general legislation has been held valid and that's not going to change, it's unlikely to change, what instead you'd be arguing was this particular order that keeps the borders shut no longer falls within the scope of what's authorised by the legislation because it's, you're no longer dealing with the immediate urgent effects of this emergency. Okay, so Michaelia Cash isn't exactly right to the extent it wouldn't be a constitutional challenge, it would be an administrative law challenge.
Right.
It would be about whether or not the order would fall within the scope of the legislation. But I'm not blaming you there for saying that because, as you can see, it's something that you need to explain in more than 10 seconds.
So under that administrative argument, could you then argue, look at the plethora of vaccination appointments in WA, anyone can get a vaccination now and reduce the risk significantly of them getting ill or even dying of COVID-19. So therefore, any administrative decision would have to take that into consideration.
Yes, so that's certainly what would happen. And so in answer to your earlier question, if you argue that today, would it be successful? Well, probably not, because we don't have up to 80% vaccination yet in Western Australia. And if you compare the situation at the moment in New South Wales and say, well, would you want that in Western Australia? The answer is probably no.
No.
Okay, so if you're looking at it right now, I don't think it would work.
Okay, but
if you're looking at it in the future, however, because of the changing circumstances, it may well be, if the facts no longer support the closing of the borders because it's no longer reasonably necessary to protect your public health, then yes, you could argue that.
So when they reached 80% in WA, which is estimated to be on the 7th of December, you could take action after that date and have a fair chance of winning using that argument.
Yes, but you'd also have to take into account other facts. 80% of itself is not itself a magic number that changes everything.
It is according to the Doherty Institute, though.
Well, no, the problem with the Doherty Institute stuff is that they have included a whole lot of different factors and assumptions, okay? So they're working on the facts that they had at the time that they made those assumptions. And we also know that since then there'll be a whole lot of other reports and more evidence that's coming along. So the world of collecting evidence on COVID didn't stop then. So, for example, you'd look at Israel and you'd say, okay, they got to 80%. What's the consequence been in Israel since then? And they are now starting to look at, well, maybe we do need to go back to lockdowns because even with 80%, they find that their rates are skyrocketing up. Now, that's partly because, I understand, and I'm not an expert, I should assert on this, but that's partly because they haven't kept in place some of the protection measures which the Doherty Institute says that we should.
That's right.
Okay, so the question then would be, if you were a court and you were looking at all of that, you'd have to look at, well, what sort of measures can you put in to make sure that, that sort of exponential growth again of COVID doesn't happen. So all of those things would be a matter for the court to look at. And what it probably do what it did last time, which is refer the matter back down to a judge in the federal court to have expert hearings. So they would have a hearing where they get expert evidence. People will come in and give all those kind of assessments, probably also the Doherty people. They would be prime experts.
Yeah.
And they would be able to update their advice and say, well, look, now we know what the situation is at the point that we got to 80%. Are those assumptions still correct, and should we still be doing this? And a court could take all of that into account. And it may well be that the Western Australian position of closing borders might not be justified, but it might also be, if it's shown to Western Australia it's not justified, it might say, OK, then we will open the borders. I mean, the problem we've got at the moment is we've got a plan to do something in the future, but we don't know exactly what the circumstances will be when we hit that date in the future. Okay. And it does make it quite hard to be able to make a definitive assessment from this distance.
And I'd say that in about the second week in December, the High Court break for Christmas, don't they?
They do have a period off over December and January, but of course they do tend to deal with very urgent things if they're needed. So we'll just see how that goes.
Thank you, Anne. Much appreciated. Thank you for your explanation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, from Sydney University, constitutional law expert Professor Anne Toomey. Yeah, that case has already been released. That one case in Queensland was the 4-year-old child who got it from a truckie, if you remember, and that was announced last night. So that's now included in today's figure of one locally transmitted case in Queensland. 131873, the telephone number. 23 minutes after 10. We've got Ask a Tradie coming up very shortly, so have your questions ready on home improvements with Simon Stevenson.
You're listening to The Chris Smith Show on 2GB 873.
All right, here's a bit of an insight from Gary in Menai about why, as I said at the start of the program, the likes of Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McGowan think that they'll be popular if they keep their borders closed. Gary says, similar to your caller, my niece lives near Bundaberg. She's a true blue Cogra girl. She said the other day she doesn't want anyone from New South Wales coming in yet because she sees it as a risk as well. On the other hand, she thinks Anastasia is mad. Well, that's right, but you can't have it both ways. If you're waiting for New South Wales and Victoria to get to COVID zero, you won't last the distance. It will be many, many years, if not decades. And that's the way, unfortunately, our future will be. And we've got to prepare for that future. And the way to do that is to get to 80% vaccinated everywhere, open the borders, and get on with our lives.
On The Chris Smith Show, Ask a Tradie, brought to you by Vigola, the original open-closed roof system.
No job, too big, too small. I always say that to you, but it's true. You can ask any question you like. You won't be made a fool of. You won't be embarrassed. We don't do that here. Especially I don't, because I'm not much of a tradie at all. But I like to do some stuff. So if you've got a question, jump on the open line right now, 131873. But get in early, because by the time I say see you later, I've usually got calls on the board and they're disappointed that they can't get through. And it is spring. It is warmer. This is the time to begin your projects. Am I right, Simon Stevenson? Good morning.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect time of the year to get outside. You know, the weather's not too hot. It's not too cold. You've got more time during the day to actually do some work as well. And I think, you know, when it becomes, summertime, we really get out and use our decks a lot more. And it is an important thing to look after because, a lot of decks are built with treated pine. And over a period of time, years ago, screws and things that we originally built treated pine decks were with can corrode from the treatment inside the timber. So doing a check of that deck for structural issues, rotted timber is really, really important as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's nothing worse than trying to do work on a deck, on a balcony, or even on a roof in really hot, searing temperature. Now's the time to do it. You make a very good point. And all that stuff, that treated pine, it all goes grey after a while. You've got to do work on it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I was working on a deck this week. I took some screws out of some timber, and internally you could see these screws had rusted, and that's the treatment, the arsenic that used to be in the timber, and it has caused. They've now come up with screws designed for treated timber, which have got a coating on the outside. So structurally, check out the deck. Check for the rotted timber. Give the timber a clean with a timber reviver or timber restorer, and then you can coat the deck with some decking oils, different stains, coatings, whatever you want to put on it to make it last and make it ready for summer and use it really well.
Absolutely. All right, we'll take a quick break. We've open the discussion point. It doesn't mean we need to be confined to that subject. You can ask whatever you want about whatever project you've got in mind or have begun. 131873, the telephone number to your calls right after this. Well, our access to vaccinations, and I mean plural, has just broadened thanks to an announcement made a very short time ago. The Therapeutic Goods Administration has released a media statement saying it has provisionally approved the use of the Moderna Australia COVID-19 vaccine Spikevax in individuals 12 years and older. This decision follows the provisional approval granted by the TGA to Spikevax on the 9th of August for use in individuals aged 18 and older. So they've gone a step further, saying it's now included for those who are 12 years of age. Don't wait for Moderna. Don't wait. As I often hear from some of the more experienced epidemiologists, the best vaccine to get is the one that you can book now and get tomorrow. Get it. Get it. 131873, the telephone number. Simon Stevenson is ready to take your calls. Back to aluminium windows. Josephine, good morning. Go right ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning,
yes,
Josephine.
I have very old aluminium windows, and they've gone all powdery along where the aluminium is. Just wondering how to clean that off and what to repaint with.
Okay, look, you can clean it with a very fine steel wool. You've just got to mask up the glass so you don't scratch the glass. You can rub that steel wool back and forth, and it will clean any of that oxidisation off the aluminium. Depending on how bad it is, you could use a little bit coarser sandpaper if you wanted to. And look, the Norglass products are absolutely fantastic for going on to aluminium windows. I would use the No Rust Primer, and then either the Weatherfast or the Northane give you many, many years of life and look absolutely brand new, like factory finish. It's better to spray them if you can, because you'll get a much better finish on them, and they will look like new. Cleaning is really, really important as well. So make sure you clean the windows down with the Nor Clean beforehand before you start any painting. That will get rid of any grease, any grime and things on the windows as well.
Yeah, it's actually on the sunny side of the house, so that's what's really happened. I think the sun. Now, where do I get the Norglass?
I'll tell you what, Josephine, I will organise you some today, all right? I will get them to organise you some. So if we put you back to the switch, I will get some sent out to you, all right?
You're getting VIP treatment, Josephine.
Thank you so much.
All right, stay right there from
Very
Carlton,
welcome.
and we'll fix up Josephine and make sure that she's looked after for her project. I want to get to Shane in Castle Hill, who's treating some pavers at the moment, and that may be some good advice that others might be interested in. Go ahead, Shane.
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good, thanks.
That's good.
Thank you, Shane.
I've repurposed some clay pavers from an old driveway, and I've laid them. They look fantastic, but I'm hoping to give them that wet look all the time, and there's lots of conflicting info online. I just want something that's going to give it a nice wet look, but not make them too slippery. Is there something you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are wet look paving sealer that you can buy at your local hardware stores. But remember, when it's wet look, it is going to be a glossy finish, and it's it will become more slippery than something that is a matte finish. But if you want to, you can put a non-slip additive into that sealer, and it will help a little bit. I would try, if you've got a spare one, go and buy a small tin of the wet look sealer, Cromlin have some available at Bunnings and things like that. Mate, just try one, put a few coats on, put some of that non-slip additive in it, and see if it gives you your desired look before you go purchasing, a big amount and do the whole thing.
Yeah, great. I missed the start there as well. You were talking about sleepers and treating outdoor timber. I've just put about 75 of the arsenic-free sleepers in the backyard. And again, I want to seal them with something that just brings that colour up. Is there a product, again, that you would recommend to do that for that type of sleeper?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you want to bring just the natural colour out of it, you're really looking at just a sort of probably a natural oil. Unfortunately, it will break down over time, like a decking oil or something you can put on there. You're going to have to keep up on it because anything that's clear like that, without changing the colour, will break down in the sun. So it's something you're going to have to do on a regular sort of basis.
No problem at all.
Good on you, Shane.
Right,
Thank you very much for your call.
much.
Good on you. 131-873. Stephen Petersham has a question for you, Simon. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, Simon and Chris. Thanks very much for my call. Look, Simon, I've got a paper film which has been stuck on the back of a Perspex window for about a year. Now, I've left it too long. I've tried to use methylated spirits, as a supplier told me with the window, to remove it, but it's really stuck on and I can't get anything to take it off. What could I use, do you think?
Okay, try and warm the label up with just a hairdryer, not too much heat. That should soften the glue. And then, look, terps is better than methylated spirits when it comes to getting adhesive off. Also, there's some adhesive removers that you can buy at the hardware store. Just got to be a little bit careful because you are Perspex. It's like a plastic. You don't want to have anything too strong. So I would try a bit of terps after heating it up. Heat it up. Try and peel it off once you've warmed it, and then you try a little bit of turpentine. Terps should get it off.
Okay, thanks very much.
Good
Simon.
on you. Terps before metho. That's interesting. Kay. Hello, Kay. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Kay.
This one is about a 40-year-old house, and what we've noticed is that there's like a mould coming on the walls about 18 inches down from each ceiling. Now, is that caused due to the roof, or what could cause that? And it's right through the house.
Yeah, look, chances are, is the house opened up quite regularly during the day for ventilation?
Yes, but it has a wood-fired heater in winter. It's down in the Southern Highlands.
Okay.
But,
yeah, look, well, most importantly, what I'd first do is wash all the walls down. You can use 80% white vinegar, 20% water. That will kill the spores of the mould and give them a really good clean down. Using bleach won't work. It's just going to bleach the mould but doesn't kill the spores. Ventilation is really, really important. Obviously Southern Highlands, you're going to get sort of cold, damp sort of winters, and a wood fire is going to create a bit of moisture in there as well with the dampness. Ventilation is so important. So maybe you could put some whirlybirds in the roof to get some ventilation in the roof as well, and checking sort of the insulation. Your insulation could need replaced if it's an old house as well.
Oh, okay. Because they said that we need to put new tiles in and a new roof, and I just thought that seems a bit extreme.
Yeah, look, I mean, I can't tell without actually looking at your roof if your roof's in bad condition. But look, ventilating your roof with a whirlybird is a really good idea because it'll allow that moisture inside the roof cavity to escape as well, if there is any. But make sure you kill that mould inside as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
All the best, Kay. Thank you. Off and racing with her project. John's got a concrete question for you. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chris. You there, Simon?
He's there.
Yes, I'm here, John.
Yes. I recently laid some concrete, just an edge around the garden, and put some black oxide in it. And when it dried, some of it went sort of white. It's got little white patches all over the place.
Okay.
I've got no idea why.
Yeah, it sounds like there's moisture sort of coming in, sort of trapped in it, or coming up through the ground. The concrete can be, if there's no damp course underneath that, the ground's very wet in one area, that can bring moisture up and bring the minerals out of that cement, the sand and cement, and cause those white deposits. So you might be better off, if you want to, using a paving paint or something. Norglass have got their paving paint in a black you could use and paint it instead of just that coloured oxide.
Okay, I'll try that, Simon.
Good on you, John. Thank you. 131873, the telephone number. Greg from Warriewood sent us an email. I have some internal balcony walls in an apartment building that are affected by efflorescence, which I know I can't easily stop. The walls with the original paint are breathable, allowing the moisture to pass through, and the efflorescence can be easily cleaned off. A few walls have been repainted and have sealed the walls, causing the paint to blister and bubble. So my question is there a paint you can recommend that is porous, breathable, and will allow the moisture to pass through?
Look, I mean, a lot of acrylic paints allow that. I think really best he's got to try and stop that water getting through. So if the water's coming through the tops of the walls, putting a waterproof membrane over the top edge of the wall, maybe he could email me some photographs at simonshouse.com.au so I can see exactly what's going on.
Simon at Simon's House. Greg from Warriewood, if you're listening, Simon at simonshouse.com.au. Just send some photos through, attach some photos so Simon can give you a little bit more specific information and advice on that job. Simon from Canley Heights is painting a concrete garage. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, hi, Chris. Thanks for taking the call. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Simon. How you going?
Oh, good, mate. Hey, look, just looking for paint recommendations. There's two brands that are at Bunnings. One's Berger and one's White Knight. Which one do you recommend for painting concrete? I've done all the prep work already. I've cleaned and etched it. So yep. I'm up to the stage where I'm letting it dry and I need to go and buy the paint so I can paint.
Mate, be very, very careful. You're talking about doing a garage floor, which you're going to put a car in there, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I dare say neither of those will be a good product to drive on with hot car tyres. So, if you drive over a painted surface on a concrete driveway or pavement area like that, and it's the middle of summer, your tyres can get really hot, and they'll do what's called a hot tyre pickup. So again, I would probably try the Norglass paving paint. It is designed for driveways and things like that. So be very, very careful when you check. Just read on the instructions of any paint when it comes to a driveway or garage that it's designed for that area, because not just a normal paving paint will work.
Well, these ones are saying that they are for garage and for driving on. So you reckon the Norglass is better, is it?
The Norglass paving paint is my recommendation. I mean, if you want to use one of the other ones there, make sure you thin the first coat so it soaks into the concrete first, and you get a really good bind to that surface. And make sure the concrete's over 28 days old as well, not a freshly poured concrete.
No, it's an old concrete. That's fine. So Norglass, where do I find that? In a paint shop? Does Bunnings have that?
My suggestion would be to go onto their website, norglass.com.au, and you can have a look at the products there.
And you can order it through there as well. Good on you, Simon. Absolutely. Thank you very much for your call. Marilyn in Currans Hill. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Hi, Simon. You still there, Simon?
Yes.
Good morning. Earlier this year, we had our front door painted, and in June, the paint on the bottom half of the door bubbled up. It was a professional painter who did it, and he is going to come back, but he's in an affected area, so we don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah, I dare say what's happened is... Yeah, I dare say the bottom of the door was not painted. When it's really important when you paint any sort of door, internally or externally, that the tops and bottoms get fully sealed of these doors. I mean, they're a man-made door. They've got lots of different timbers in them, depending on the manufacturer of that door. Sometimes it can be laminates and all sorts of things. Those tops and bottoms need to be painted with 3 or 4 coats. So what we normally do is we take the door off the hinges, put it onto sawhorses, and seal the tops and bottoms of the door before we even start to do the door, and it's fully sealed, and that way your door will last for a very, very long time.
That's the trick. How's that, Marilyn?
That sounds good. How do we take... Oh, all right, that's fine. Thank you.
Good on you, Marilyn. Appreciate your call. I've run out of time. Simon Stevenson, you've been on fire today. Thank you so much for all of that.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good week.
Have a great day.
Good on you.
You too, mate.
Simon
Bye-bye.
Stevenson, Ask a Tradie, 12 minutes away from 11. After the break, what does Mr. Ladbroke himself, Tom Hackett, thinks might win some of these races today? We've got him back on because it is the beginning of the Spring Racing Carnival, and a few tips coming your way right after this. 8 minutes to 11.
Now it's time for a betting update. Thanks to our friends at Ladbrokes. Giddy up with Ladbrokes. Download the Ladbrokes app today. Gamble responsibly.
Yes, we're back to the racetrack for the spring racing season, and it is time to back a winner with Ladbrokes. Tom Hackett, good to have you back.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having me back. Very excited for a big weekend of sport and racing.
Very true, mate. Very true. Now, we've got the Chelmsford Stakes, which we need to cover. This is the Group 2 mile race at Randwick.
The feature race at Randwick this afternoon. It's a really interesting betting race, this one. Cascadian, the Doncaster Mile winner, opened as a $4.40 shot. It's been really well backed, though. It's the market mover. It's in the $3.20. Think it over. It's a Group 1 winner as well, $4.80. Kukaracha, it's the Queensland Derby winner right there at $6.50. It's been the best backed at a price. It's been $12 into $6.50. But I'm with Cascadian here. I think it's the horse to beat.
Cascadian number 2. Kukaracha. A bit of Mexican in there. Concord Stakes, Group 3. It's only over 1,000 metres.
It's 1,000 metres, but a really interesting race here because we see the return of Nature Strip. He's a $2.50 chance at the moment. He's the favourite to win the Everest, but his record in the Concord Stakes isn't great. He's been beaten as favourite in the last 2 years, but punters are confident he can bounce back and start his campaign the right way this afternoon.
Okay, Nature Strip number 1 in race 5. The Tramway Stakes.
The Tramway Stakes, another interesting race because they've got the resuming of Zaki. He was the horse that starred during the Brisbane Winter Racing Carnival. He's on a path towards the Ladbrokes Cox Plate, but this is short of his best distance range, so he's still a clear favourite here. He's been $2.80 into $2.25, but it's definitely not his go. So Dreamforce on the second one of betting at $6, I think is a good danger. Right. I think the value runner here is Rock at $10 for Team Hawks. The horse has a really good second up record, 3 from 4 second up. I think it'll be it can run well at a nice price.
Something each way at $10. That sounds like my sort of bet. Fian Stakes, race 8 at Moonee Valley.
Very important race, this one, Chris, because the winner gets direct entry into the Ladbrokes Cox Plate. And we've got a great story here with Elephant, a horse from New Zealand. It's had 5 wins from 5 race starts. It's a husband-wife training combination. The husband, Dave Brown's, moved to Australia. He won't see his wife for 6 months just because they think this horse could be an absolute superstar. So there's plenty of narrative around this galloper this afternoon, and it is favourite as well. It's $5. Superstorm's $5.50. Sierra Sue, $6. I think the value runner, though, is the Chosen One at $8. He's run well in a Melbourne Cup. He's run well in a Sydney Cup. I just think at $8, he's a really good each-way bet in what's a really open race.
All right, very quickly, Broncos Knights, 3 p.m. at Suncorp.
Broncos have been really well backed here, Chris. They've been $2.25 into $1.75. Knights missing a lot of key players. They've been on the drift. $1.75 out to $2.10. Broncos should be too good.
Great stuff. Good on you, Tom. We'll talk again next Saturday.
Thanks, Chris.
Tom Hackett from Ladbrokes, and coming up on the program, that 11 o'clock press conference. Just before we get to the Health Minister, first question in the rolling quiz. Now, the prize today in the rolling quiz is a Spinalese pillow. Thank you to Spinalese. Neck pain, headache, snoring, or just a great night's sleep, you've got to get yourself a Spinalese pillow. Spinalese, eze.com.au. We've got a couple at home. Love them. All right, so that's what you're playing for. We are going to give you 3 clues. Audio clues, and they're 3 musical instruments. You've got to guess all 3 musical instruments. Here's the first one. What is that musical instrument? That is the first clue. 2 others coming later in the program. Yeah, we'll get to Brad Hazard. No sign of the Premier today. She will have today off. No doubt we'll hear from the Premier tomorrow, but that press conference will be run by the New South Wales Minister for Health, Brad Hazzard, and he'll be joined by Jeremy McNulty. They are moving into position right now. The mask comes off, and here is Brad Hazzard, the New South Wales Minister for Health, reading the numbers for the last 24 hours.
Dr McAnulty and also John Brogden to talk about mental health issues from Lifeline. So to 8 p.m. last night, there were 131,174 tests, and from those tests, there were 1,533 locally acquired cases of COVID-19. There are now close to 11,000 people with COVID-19 who are currently being cared for by New South Wales Health. The vast majority, about 90%, are being cared for at home, in the community, or in New South Wales Health's special health accommodation. There are currently 1,041 COVID-19 cases that are being managed in our hospitals, and there are 173 people in intensive care, and 62 of those people in intensive care are requiring ventilation. I want to stress the importance of vaccination yet again. When we look at the number of people in our intensive care units, of the 173 people in ICU, or intensive care units, 137 are not vaccinated. 29 people have received just their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and 7 have received 2 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. Very sadly, to 8 p.m. last night, we have had 4 more people pass away. We had a gentleman in his 60s who died at his home, and he was from Western Sydney. We had a lady in her 80s from southwest Sydney. She died at Fairfield Hospital. We had a gentleman in his 50s from Western Sydney who died at Westmead Hospital, and a gentleman in his 70s from southwest Sydney who died at Liverpool Hospital. Just want to express my condolences to each of those people's families and friends. Passing of a family member or friend is always extremely sad, and I just want to really express those strong wishes to each of the community members who knew those people, and to just say we're thinking of you. Sadly, none of the 4 people who passed away were vaccinated. The good news, though, is New South Wales residents are still getting out there and getting vaccinated at a great rate of speed. There were almost 130,000 vaccines yesterday administered in New South Wales. Almost 50,000 of those were administered by the New South Wales Health team, and the balance of the other cases were administered in pharmacies and general practices. I stress there are a range of avenues for you to get vaccines. Right across New South Wales, there are pharmacists and there are GPs with vaccines, and of course there are also the state established hubs and centres, and there should be one near you. Book in and get a vaccine. If you are not vaccinated, book in and get one. 72% of people aged over 16 now have received 1 dose in New South Wales, and just shy of 40% are fully vaccinated. So 39% are fully vaccinated. I want to thank the community more broadly across New South Wales for getting out and being part of what is a great journey to beat this virus, to get vaccinated. It's the way forward. Tomorrow we're going to have a Super Sunday vaccination blitz for all police, fire and emergency services personnel who live in those 12 LGAs of concern. We're obviously very, very concerned as a government and as New South Wales Health to make sure that we have all of our frontline workers vaccinated. And so tomorrow is a very special day, and I would just say to those remaining, many of the emergency workers have already been vaccinated, but if you haven't been, tomorrow is your golden opportunity to go and get vaccinated. And you can go through nsw.gov.au, and there's also links that have been sent to many of those workers from their employers. I want to stress also that healthcare, hospital and aged care workers from these 12 LGAs of concern can also book in. So I stress healthcare, hospital and aged care workers can also book in for that Super Sunday tomorrow. The participating vaccination hubs for those workers are at Sydney Olympic Park, at Bankstown, at Macquarie Fields and Prairie Wood. And as I said, you can go through nsw.gov.au or the link that has been provided by your workplace. Now, obviously, and I'll ask Dr McAnulty to give more detail on this in a moment, obviously, and unfortunately and sadly, the majority of our positive cases still continue to be in southwest and western Sydney. As I said, he'll give the details of the numbers and the suburbs. But we all are still having cases across our regional areas, particularly across the far west of New South Wales and across western New South Wales. Through the western New South Wales local health district is much closer to Sydney. Far west is obviously Broken Hill and the area more towards Broken Hill. In the western New South Wales local health district, there were 38 new cases of COVID-19 reported to 8 p.m. last night. Unfortunately, that does bring the total cases in that local health district, that western New South Wales local health district, to 759. The 38 cases that I just referred to, the majority are in Dubbo, 22 cases. 9 were in Burke, 3 were in Bathurst, 3 were in Orange, and 1 in Bogan. To 8 p.m. last night in far western local health district, there were 9 cases, 9 new cases. All of those 9 cases are in Wilcannia. This means that to this point we have a total in that far western local health district of 107 cases. I think there are 97 in Wilcannia and 9 in Broken Hill. And I think there's also 1 case that I referred to earlier in the week is now in Queensland. There are 15 new cases across the Hunter, New England local health district to 8 p.m. last night. And that brings the total in that district, the Hunter, New England district, to 218 since the 5th of August. 10 of the new cases are in the Port Stephens local government area. 1 is in the Lake Macquarie local government area, 1 is in the Newcastle local government area, and 3 are in the Maitland local government area. There are 17 new cases reported to 8 p.m. last night in the Illawarra, and that brings their local health district to a total of 140 cases. Those 17 cases, there were 12 that were actually in the Wollongong area. There were 3 in the Shell Harbour local government area and 2 in Shoalhaven. There were also, in the Central Coast area, there were 15 new cases, and that takes the total number in that district to 93. I want to stress that the way forward, and it's a very positive way forward, is to get vaccinated. I want to thank all of the citizens in New South Wales who have gone out and done what you need to do for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for New South Wales and indeed Australia, and got vaccinated. And I want to say to those who are still hesitating, there is no reason to hesitate. There are very good vaccines available here in New South Wales. There are an abundance of venues where you can get vaccinated, and it is absolutely crucial that for us to get back our freedoms as quickly as possible, for us to be able to get back to our normal way of life, or as close as possible in a COVID environment, you need to get vaccinated. So please do that. Please take up the opportunities that have been offered in so many places. Now I'm going to ask Dr McAnulty to add some more to what I've already said.
Okay, we'll leave the press conference there just for a time being because, as you know, the health official usually just repeats what we hear from either the Premier or the Health Minister. But in summary, 1,533 new locally acquired cases. That is another record in New South Wales during this pandemic. And that was from a testing regime of, 131,174 COVID-19 tests. That's a little down on the previous day, 154,654. A man in his 60s from Western Sydney died at home, unvaccinated. A woman in her 80s from the southwestern Sydney area died at Fairfield Hospital, unvaccinated. A man in his 50s from Western Sydney died at Westmead, unvaccinated. A man in his 70s from southwest Sydney died at Liverpool Hospital, unvaccinated. And getting through the other bits and pieces of the 1,533 cases, 512 from Western Sydney, 494 from southwestern Sydney, 150 from Sydney. That is creeping up and up, that number from the central Sydney area. And I just wonder whether that particular local government area will be in lockdown before long. And 122 from southeastern Sydney. The other areas, the other area health districts are all in their double figures, not triple figures. So the vaccination rate continues to soar, and that's certainly a good sign. Faster it goes, the better, not only for lockdowns and getting out of them, but also for the health of the state. And as soon as we get to 80%, according to the Doherty Institute report, we will start to see less in intensive care and less deaths. Meanwhile, I just want to give some detail to you about that heroin seizure, the largest heroin seizure in almost 2 decades in Australia. It's an Australian Federal Police-led operation. It saw the arrest of a 29-year-old Sydney man from Mount Colar. He will appear at Parramatta Bail Court today, following the record detection of 350 kilograms of heroin with an estimated potential street value of about $156 million. So that basically equates to more than 1.1 million street deals. He was arrested at his home north of Hornsby at Mount Colar, charged with possess a commercial quantity of unlawfully imported border-controlled drugs. The maximum penalty is life. Search warrants were executed at Miller, Balcombe Hills and Kings Park and 2 business premises at Hornsby. They found the heroin concealed inside a consignment of vertical mixers, so kitchen mixers, that arrived via air cargo from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And investigators followed them until they were delivered to the destined address, which is a storage facility at Hornsby. I want to go back to the press conference. John Brogden, the former New South Wales Premier, talking about mental health.
What's happening with respect to mental health for so many people in New South Wales and Australia. The first thing I want to say is in recent weeks we've heard a lot of people talk about a shadow pandemic in mental health. I think it's important to realise it's not in the shadows, it's real, and it is a crisis. The crisis is extending to all parts of Australia, all parts of New South Wales, and to many, many people. What we have seen is a significant increase amongst children and adolescents in their mental health illness, in their suicidality, and in stress and depression and anxiety. That is a matter of enormous concern. However, at the same time, we at Lifeline are very pleased that people are reaching out in the sort of numbers we've never seen before. Year on year, there's been an 11% increase to calls to Lifeline in New South Wales, and compared to 2 years ago, there's been a 28% increase in calls to Lifeline. There is some silver lining in the cloud, and that is people are reaching out. Last year in New South Wales, there was a 5% reduction in suicide. And bear in mind, 9 months of that year were in the first COVID lockdown. In this year, we've seen no increase in suicides on average across all age groups. So there's good news that people are reaching out and getting the help that they need. I have depression, I have suicidal ideation. I know what it's like to live with mental illness, and I know what it's like to live in mental illness during COVID. It's tough, and people are doing it tough. But there is hope. We all hope, towards the end of the lockdown. And one of the best things we can do for people's mental health is get out of lockdown as quickly as possible. In the meantime, there are a number of things people can do to look after themselves. It's really important to keep a routine. Don't stay in bed all day. That won't help you at all. Get up, get changed. It's really critical also that you take advantage of the opportunity to exercise. I sometimes think when we hear the word exercise, people think they've got to do 100 push-ups. I don't think that's what we mean. What we mean is just get out and go for a walk. Walk around the block twice, go down to the park and come back. Just get some sun on your face, some wind on your face, maybe even some rain on your face, but please get out. I can't stress enough how important it is to get out of home and use the opportunity for exercise, to get out and to get some fresh air. That's really important as well. I know this is hard, but try not to catastrophise things, because we are getting through this. Gladys Berejiklian's made it very clear, as has Brad Hazard, things will get worse before they'll get better, but they will get better. So we are coming through the other side of this. We need to hang on to the opportunity to see our way through this, and we need to hang on to the hope that we will get there. I know it's hard, it's incredibly difficult. No child, no adolescent has ever lived through a time like this. In fact, most of us have never lived through a time like this. And this is affecting everybody. This is affecting us all in very different ways. So please look after yourself. Please be kind to yourself. And the other important message is don't suffer in silence. Don't think that nobody cares, and don't think you can't reach out for help. Whether it's Lifeline, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, on 13 11 14, we're there to help. And although our calls have gone up, we are answering our calls. I also want to say we have a text service, 0477 13 11 14, that's operating 14 hours a day on its way to 24 hours. And particularly for young people, Kids Helpline is there, 1800 55 1800. So please don't suffer in silence. People care, people want to help you. It's okay not to be okay right now. These are extraordinary times, but there is help there. Please reach out and get it, because it can be the difference for you between life and death.
Okay, that's John Brogden, the former New South Wales opposition leader. Didn't quite make Premier, but the former New South Wales opposition leader, and that Lifeline number 13 11 14. And those suburbs, I just want to reiterate the suburbs. If you are living in Liverpool, Punchbowl, Bankstown, Guildford, Marylands or Greenacre, you've got to go get a test. If you've got the slightest idea that you may have a symptom, go get a test and book in to get a vaccination. Book in and get a vaccination. The vaccination that exists now, AstraZeneca, has been taken by 50 million people in the UK. It is hailed as the vaccination that has saved so many lives. And we have a reputation here of AstraZeneca which is unfair. According to the statistics, you've got a 1 in 1 million chance of dying from a side effect, a infinitesimal side effect in terms of clotting. 1 in 1 million. And you don't get that kind of mortality rate or odds in most of the prescription medicines you take over the counter. So 13 11 14 for Lifeline, and that text line that they run is 04. A lot of people don't like to pick up the telephone and make the call, and they'd rather text and be in a conversation that way. That's fine. Do that. 0477 13 11 14. It works 14 hours a day, but will be pushed up to 24 hours before long. 131873, the telephone number. I'll get back to the open line coming up very shortly. Also, I want to speak with Peter Switzer on finance today. A couple of interesting things that he has to talk about. And we've got our reach out promotion. I want to give $1,000 away to someone who's been nominated. And also John Rocker, all things automotive, all in this hour, plus the second question in the rolling quiz. Don't go anywhere. You're going to love this. 23 minutes after 11. On the line, I have a woman by the name of Janine. Is that right, Janine?
Yes, it is.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Very well. You know, you're on 2GB at the moment, and you've been nominated to win $1,000. I understand you've been working from home. You work for a school, and you've got homeschooling with a 14-year-old girl and 18-year-old twin boys at uni, along with putting up with your husband, who can't work at the moment due to lockdown. Also, Coco the dog. I'm told that you're one tough lady, and this would be a great boost to her mentality and relieve a lot of stress. I would just like to let her know we do care and appreciate all the hard work she puts in. How's that for a nomination?
Oh, wow. Great.
You got $1,000.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. I'm a bit emotional at the moment.
As you should be. I would be for $1,000. Absolutely.
Oh.
It's a tough time, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's very tough.
Oh, that homeschooling stuff, like, seriously. You know, you really worry for your kids through this period, and it doesn't let up, does it?
No, it doesn't. The boys did year 12 last year through COVID, and
awful.
oh, it is awful.
A little bit of relief with $1,000. You were nominated by your mother-in-law, Monica, who's on the other line. Hello, Monica.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Very well. You've done well. What a great nomination. She's got the $1,000.
Oh, I'm emotional too. That's great. She deserves it, because not only does she have to put up with me and the whole family, her poor mum's not well and in hospital, so yeah, it's a very trying time.
When it rains, it doesn't just rain, it just pours, doesn't it, Janine?
Sure does.
Yeah. Hang in there. As John Brogden said a little bit earlier, things will get tougher as we get through the next 8 weeks, but in about 8 weeks' time, we'll be through the worst of it.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
Yeah, great stuff. Good on you, Janine. Use the $1,000 wisely, but rashly. You know, get out there and enjoy yourself, Janine, if you can.
There's not too much open, but I will.
That's right. When they do open, get out there and enjoy yourself. Monica, thank you for submitting that nomination.
Oh, thank you very much. That's just fantastic. She's a very deserved person.
Great to hear from you, Monica. Thank you. You're very deserved mother-in-law. And Janine, thank you. Just stay on the line and we'll get the $1,000 to you in the Reach Out with 2GB promotion. I love this promotion. Just comes at the right time, doesn't it? Fantastic. Bob's on the open line. Hi, Bob.
Oh, good day, Chris. Thanks for taking my call.
It's okay.
Mate, where do I start? Well, I know you're busy. Prima Donna Palaszczuk and also our friend Mark McGowan in Western Australia, they are basically, whilst they're duly elected, they are also self-anointed dictators. And that's exactly what they are. At the end of the day, they attend the Friday conferences, crisis conference, whatever else. They walk away from there after agreeing to things and then do their own thing.
Don't they? They turn their back on their agreements and anything discussed in National Cabinet. We've seen it so often.
Absolutely so, mate. And it's just so frustrating. When I say self-anointed dictators, but I believe there is a much larger agenda on the horizon, and that relates to the next federal election. I mean, even Daniel Andrews now has sort of pulled his horns in a bit because they've been struck with this Delta
He
strain.
knows how impossible it is to deal with. All you can do is put some kind of loose lid on it. And that's exactly what we're doing in New South Wales. You look at 1,533. Well,